The trader you become. Why traders keep sabotaging themselves. Most traders already know what they should do. They know they should respect their stop loss. They know they should avoid revenge trading. They know they should not overtrade. They know they should follow their plan. And yet, they still break their rules. Again, and again, and again. Not because they are unintelligent, not because they lack information, but because trading is not simply a knowledge problem. It is a behavioral and emotional conditioning problem. That is one of the hardest truths in trading psychology. Knowing the rule and emotionally being able to follow the rule are two completely different things, because in the moment, when fear appears, when greed appears, when urgency appears, the emotional brain often becomes stronger than the rational mind. And suddenly, the trader begins negotiating against structure. Just this once. This one is okay. I am not really breaking the rule. I'll just give it a little more room. And in that moment, the trader is no longer following a system. They are following emotion. That is why so many traders feel trapped in cycles they cannot seem to escape, because they are not fighting the market. They are fighting conditioning. And conditioning does not disappear simply because you understand it. It changes through repetition, through structure, through emotional awareness, through repeatedly interrupting old behavior until discipline slowly becomes identity. Chapter 1. The conflict between knowledge and behavior. One of the most frustrating experiences in trading is knowing exactly what you should do and still not doing it. You create rules. You promise yourself discipline. You tell yourself, tomorrow will be different. And sometimes it is, for a few hours, for a few trades, for a few days. Then suddenly, the old behavior returns. The impulsive entry, the moved stop loss, the revenge trade, the emotional overtrading, and afterward, clarity returns. The trader sits there wondering, why did I do that again? Because the emotional state changed decision-making. This is why behavior change feels so difficult. Most people believe, if I understand the lesson, I should naturally change. But understanding is not rewiring. Understanding happens intellectually. Rewiring happens behaviorally, especially under emotional pressure. And trading creates enormous emotional pressure. Every candle activates emotion: hope, fear, greed, regret, urgency, excitement, frustration. The nervous system becomes constantly stimulated, and eventually, behavior becomes automatic. That is why many traders do not consciously choose self-sabotage in the moment. They repeat conditioning automatically, because the emotional brain seeks familiarity under stress, even if the familiar behavior is destructive. Chapter 2. Emotional bargaining. The dangerous part about emotional impulses is that they often sound reasonable. That is why discipline breaks down so easily. The trader does not think, I am sabotaging myself. Instead, the trader thinks, this trade feels different. I'll just break the rule once. I can control it. This setup is probably okay. I'll just widen the stop a little. And in the moment, those thoughts feel emotionally convincing, because the brain is trying to escape discomfort. That is important to understand. Most self-sabotage is not really self-hatred. It is emotional survival behavior. The brain is trying to recover losses, avoid pain, regain certainty, regain control, escape discomfort. The problem is that short-term emotional relief often destroys long-term consistency, and slowly, the trader begins bargaining against their own structure. Tiny compromises, tiny negotiations, small moments where standards begin weakening emotionally, and eventually, something dangerous happens psychologically. The brain begins learning. My rules are flexible when emotion becomes uncomfortable. That is how discipline slowly collapses, not all at once, but one emotional compromise at a time. Chapter 3: Why Old Habits Keep Returning. Habits are difficult to change because the old behavior still exists neurologically. The emotional pathways are still familiar, and the brain naturally returns to familiar emotional behavior under stress, especially when those behaviors have been repeated hundreds or thousands of times. This is why change often feels inconsistent. A trader may improve for several days, then suddenly relapse, not because progress disappeared, but because behavioral conditioning takes time to weaken. And unfortunately, many traders quit emotionally during this stage because they believe, if I was truly changing, I would never struggle again. But that is not how real behavior change works. Even disciplined traders still experience temptation. They still hear the voice, just this once. The difference is not that emotional impulses disappear completely. The difference is that the impulse becomes weaker, and the trader becomes stronger at interrupting it. That is a huge distinction. Discipline is not the absence of emotional impulse. Discipline is the ability to stay aligned with structure while emotional resistance is present. That takes time and repetition and emotional tolerance, because every time you respect the stop loss, avoid the revenge trade, stop trading on time, follow your rule. Despite discomfort, you are teaching the nervous system something new. You are training yourself to tolerate emotional discomfort without reacting impulsively. That is how identity slowly changes. Chapter 4: The Addiction to Stimulation. Many traders unknowingly become addicted to stimulation. Not just profits. Stimulation. The excitement of movement. The emotional intensity. The possibility of reward. The urge to recover losses. The constant engagement. This is why traders often struggle to stop. Even after profits, even after losses, even after exhaustion. Because the nervous system begins craving emotional activity. That is why overtrading becomes so common. Not because traders lack intelligence, but because constant stimulation weakens emotional control. The exhausted mind seeks action. It seeks relief. It seeks recovery. And eventually, trading stops becoming intentional. It becomes compulsive. This is also why boredom becomes dangerous in trading. Because many traders mistake boredom for the need to participate. But sometimes boredom is simply the absence of emotional stimulation. And learning to tolerate that silence is part of discipline. Chapter 5: Structure Protects Behavior. This is why structure matters so much. Because willpower alone is unreliable under emotional pressure. Structure protects behavior when emotion appears. That is why trading windows, routines, rules, limits, consistent schedules are so important psychologically, because structure interrupts automatic behavior. The purpose of a designated trading window is not to force trades. It is to train disciplined observation and selective execution. I only trade during my structured window, and only if my setup appears. Sometimes no trade is a good trade, because consistency is not built through random participation. It is built through repeated disciplined execution, a consistent schedule, a consistent setup, consistent execution, consistent risk management, and a consistent system. Over time, this teaches the trader something powerful. You do not need every move. You do not need mediocre setups. You do not need to trade out of boredom, pressure, or urgency. You learn to filter instead of force, to wait instead of react, to let go of trades that do not meet your standards. Because patience becomes easier when your mind is no longer endlessly chasing stimulation. Chapter 6. Internal consistency. Most traders believe change happens when motivation becomes strong enough. But motivation is unstable. Emotion changes, confidence changes, the market changes, and eventually, every trader discovers the same painful truth. Knowing the rule is not the same as following the rule. Because under emotional pressure, the mind begins negotiating against structure. Just this once. This one is okay. I am not really breaking the rule. I'll just give it a little more room. That is how self-sabotage usually happens. Not through obvious destruction, but through tiny compromises, emotional bargaining, small moments where the trader slowly negotiates against their own standards. And every time this happens, something important occurs psychologically. Internal consistency weakens. Because eventually the brain begins learning, my rules are flexible when emotion becomes uncomfortable. And once the mind learns that, discipline becomes unstable. But the opposite is also true. Every time the trader says, even though this feels uncomfortable, I still follow my rule, something else begins happening internally. The brain begins learning. My behavior remains consistent even under emotional pressure. That is identity formation. That is coherence, not perfection, not emotional intensity, but repeated internal consistency, repeated alignment between your decisions and your standards. This is why discipline is not about eliminating temptation. Temptation will still appear. Fear will still appear. Urgency will still appear. The impulse to widen the stop loss will still appear. The urge to revenge trade will still appear. The desire to break your time limit will still appear. Even disciplined traders experience these thoughts. The difference is not that emotional impulses disappear completely. The difference is that the trader slowly becomes stronger at interrupting them. That is what real discipline actually is. Not the absence of emotional resistance, but the ability to stay aligned with structure while emotional resistance is present. Chapter 7. One day at a time. And unfortunately, real change takes time. Longer than most traders want. Because understanding is not rewiring. Rewiring happens through repeated behavior, repeated decisions, repeated moments where the trader chooses structure over impulse again, and again, and again. That is why real change often feels messy. You improve for several days, then break a rule, then improve again, then relapse again. But that does not mean progress disappeared. Because behavioral conditioning weakens gradually, and eventually, the emotional impulses begin losing intensity. The pauses become longer. Awareness becomes stronger. The trader begins catching behavior earlier, and slowly, disciplined behavior starts becoming more familiar than emotional chaos. That is when identity begins changing, not because emotion disappears, but because the trader no longer obeys every emotional impulse automatically. This is why short-term commitments can become powerful psychologically. Not, I must become a perfect trader forever. But, today I follow my rules no matter what. Or, for the next week, my only goal is to follow my rules. Or, for the next 30 days, my only goal while trading is behavioral consistency. Not making more money, not predicting perfectly, not winning every trade, just following the rule. Because every moment matters. Every moment where the trader wants to widen the stop, chase the move, force another trade, revenge trade, ignore the time limit, and still says, no, my rule is my rule. That moment matters enormously psychologically, because every one of those moments is either reinforcing the old identity, or strengthening the new one. And eventually, something important changes. The rule stops feeling like restriction. It starts feeling like self-respect. Final reflection. The trader you become. Every trader eventually faces the same question. Not, do I know the rules? But, who do I become under emotional pressure? Because trading reveals behavior. It reveals impatience, fear, urgency, impulsiveness, the need for certainty, the inability to tolerate discomfort. And this is why the market changes people. Not because charts are magical, but because repeated emotional exposure reveals conditioning. And slowly, traders are forced to confront themselves. That is why discipline is not built in one moment. It is built through repeated behavior over time. One respected stop loss, one avoided revenge trade, one moment where patience wins over impulse, repeated consistently until the new behavior slowly becomes identity. That is the real work, not predicting the market, but changing behavior under pressure. Because ultimately, the trader you become is not decided by your best day. It is decided by the behaviors you repeat consistently when emotion appears. And if this message stayed with you, then do not let it end as motivation. Apply it. One disciplined decision, one respected rule, one moment where patience becomes stronger than impulse. And if you want more content like this, you can subscribe and continue the journey. Because the trader you become is decided one decision at a time.